Good afternoon, I'm Bill Anderson, coming live from the Costa del Sol. I'm very happy to introduce my guest for today, Sue Williams. Sue, welcome.
I'm here now. Sorry.
You're there, Sue. Well done.
Let me put my headset back in. Sorry about that.
Don't worry about it, Sue. That's great. Anyway, welcome to Expat Radio, Sue. Now,
Thank you very much.
we are going to be
Nice to be here.
talking. We're going to be talking about Pilates, which is, I think, a very interesting topic. I've been doing a bit of research on it, but and you're not just a Pilates instructor. You have your own studio here in La Cala here on the Costa del Sol. But a little bit about you first, Sue, before we sort of go on and get into the nitty gritty of Pilates. Where are your origins, Sue?
Originally, I am from Stockport, which is just south of Manchester in England.
Right.
And I lived there for a number of years, worked there, did a lot of traveling for my work. And then in 2004, my husband and I moved to North Carolina in the United States.
Right.
We lived there for a couple of years, and then we moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Right.
in the United States, and lived there for about 13 years. And then we moved to Spain in 2020.
Oh, right. So you moved at the difficult time after Brexit, Sue, yeah?
Yeah, we moved just before the Brexit withdrawal,
Ah,
but we
right.
moved in between two lockdowns.
So our producer was saying that Stockport was very close to where he lived in Sale in Manchester.
Oh,
Yeah.
next door.
You were neighbours, Dave, and you didn't even know it.
Yeah.
So I take it was work that took you to the United States then, Sue, was it?
It was my husband's work, yes.
Yeah.
At the time, he'd worked for the company in the UK and then transferred over to the US.
Right. Okay. Was that a good experience living over in the States?
Was it a good experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a great experience. Very different. Both, North Carolina and Pennsylvania were very, very different from one another.
Right.
Very interesting for someone who comes from a very small country to go and live in a very big country, and just see the differences just within the same, just in a different couple of states. But
Right.
I worked there and I traveled an awful lot as well, around. I was fortunate to be able to travel around with my work, so I did get to see quite a bit of the States as well.
Right. Okay. And do you think this is your final move here in Spain? Do you see that this is where you're going to really sort of settle down? How does that feel?
I think so. At this point, I'm always one to never say never, because
Hmm.
who knows? But, at this point, we are very happy here. We like it here. What's not to like, really? Yeah, we like it here. And I think that this is where we'll stay. But like I say, never say never.
Never say never. Yeah. I when you say what's not to like, and I saw the weather forecast for this coming week, I say, well, that's one thing not to like because
Yes,
I,
okay. But, the blue skies
I
every day,
know.
that's lovely.
It is,
In the shade.
those of us who live here, we do have to consider that people spend an awful lot of money coming out here on holiday, and you get sort of bah humbugs like me saying, "Oh, it's too hot, 43 degrees," but it's what people come here for, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I say that, but I try and go, oh well, look, I can look outside my window and it's a blue sky. It's
Yeah.
not gloomy,
Right.
even though it's hot.
No, it's rarely gloomy at this time. Actually, it's rarely gloomy at any time of the year. We probably could count on one hand the number of really gloomy days that we get.
That's true.
I think just being surrounded by the light and everything is really it's kind of uplifting, isn't it?
It is. It is just. It makes a difference to your mood, I think, when you wake up and the sky is blue. And, I actually live inland a little, but I come down to the coast for work, and you can just walk outside and see the ocean. It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
The thing is, in this part of Spain, you don't need to go very far inland for the temperatures to rise by 3 or 4 or 5 degrees compared to the coast.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's definitely hotter where I live than down at the coast. But
Yeah.
again, I'm not complaining. I have a nice breeze up there as well. Not
Right.
every day, but a lot of the time.
Some days, yeah. So, Sue, you set up your Pilates studio here in the Cala de Mijas. When did Pilates come into your life? I guess this isn't something that you just decided to take up a couple of years ago.
No, not at all. So, as I said, in my previous career, I traveled an awful lot and never really had a very consistent exercise regime. And one day, and I really wanted to get into something that, with being away all the time, I'd start something and then move on. And one day when I was traveling in about 2007, I think it was, I was reading a magazine, probably on a plane, can't remember exactly, but saw this article about Pilates, which I'd actually never heard of. And I was looking at it, and there was some interesting looking machines in the photographs, and I started to read about Pilates and the benefits, and thought, oh, this is something I'd like to try. So I set my husband a task to find a Pilates studio for me in
Right.
Pittsburgh, where we were living at the time, because for my birthday, that's what I wanted that year. Can you find me a Pilates studio? And he bought me 5 private sessions for my birthday. My birthday's in October. So at that point, I was traveling an awful lot. I'd spoken to the teacher on the telephone, didn't actually get in
Right.
to the studio.
Right.
And then just straight in the new year, right after the new year, I hurt my back with all of my travel and so on. And I ended up having to go to physical therapy. And during that period, the Pilates teacher called me to ask me how I was. And I had said to her, I want to get started, but at this point, this is where I am. And she said to me, well, when your physical therapist says you're ready, you can be released to exercise, let me know and I can talk to him and kind of find out what we need to focus on within the Pilates method, what
Right.
we need to work on. So once I was released to exercise, I started working with her. I was still traveling, but I would do a weekly session with her. She gave me, and that was on the equipment, on the apparatus stuff. And then she would give me some mat work to work whilst I was traveling, and that I could do quite easily in my hotel room.
Right.
And so I was being consistent with it, and I absolutely fell in love with it at that point. Not only because my back felt better, but I felt stronger and more flexible, but also I was constantly being challenged. I had to learn something new. I had to learn how to move in a different way. And it really engaged my brain as well as my body, which I enjoy. And then about a year after I'd started, that studio that I was going to was hosting a teacher training for the first level of mat, level 1 mat. And I thought, well, I'm interested. I'll go and take the training and just see, even if it's just for my own personal knowledge. And during that training, I really got a new appreciation of the work. I knew the exercises, I knew the movement, but I hadn't got an appreciation of the depth of detail behind that movement and how much knowledge my teachers actually had in being able to get people to move in a really efficient way that works best for their body. And I had done some teaching in my previous career on software, to adults, but I also got an appreciation of how challenging it is to actually teach at that point. And I was, I guess at that point, hooked. So I went through my mat training, my initial mat training, and then I took another level of mat, and I started to teach some group mat classes. I was still traveling. I was doing it, I was covering for people or working at the weekend. And then I decided I wanted to get into it in more detail. I wanted to go through what we call systems training, which includes learning all of the equipment
Right.
to become fully certified, which takes a while to do that. So I went through all of that systems training. And then during that period, I actually decided to change my job and to step away from what I'd been doing and concentrate on the Pilates. So I built that up. I taught in a number of studios around Pittsburgh, around the Pittsburgh area for a number of years. And that's really where I started. It went, from about 2008 when I
Yes.
first started for myself.
Yeah.
And I went all the way through until we got to 2020 when COVID came and changed everything for everybody.
It did for a lot of people, well, for everybody, but for people in these kind of services, whether it was physical therapy or Pilates or other types of therapy centres, it became very difficult, didn't it, to actually even have people close to you, that was nothing to do with COVID per se. It was to do with the regulations that were set up. And who was allowed to come where, and also all these kind of things. So
well, when we first went into lockdown, no, obviously no business could open, no studio could be open, you couldn't be in person, and so at that point it was like we either go online teaching or you just don't teach.
Right.
And I think for a lot of teachers, going online was not something we'd ever thought about doing before,
Right,
because
yes.
you're so used to being face to face and being with the client and being able to have that contact, be able to read their facial expressions and look at their body in detail and even touch to guide them, that to go online was completely out of our scope.
Sure.
But within after about a week after we first went into lockdown, I taught my first class online. I did a group class. And then I started to teach some of my private clients online. And, it was a learning curve for all of us, not only for the teachers, but also for the clients. Like, how do you set up your camera? You learn very quickly that having a dark room and a dark mat and all black clothing, you can't see
it doesn't
anything.
work, yes.
So we learned together. And, I was very fortunate. I was able to continue teaching during that period before going back to the studio. And in fact, I have clients still to this day online.
Right.
Or, what are we, 3 years later? Never thought that would happen. 3 years
Right.
later, I'm still teaching online. I'm very fortunate. And obviously, when I moved here, I managed to keep those clients and
Right.
carried on teaching.
Yeah.
So, it worked out in the end. It was a bit daunting at the beginning.
Yeah. For those, I guess there's not many people listening who have never heard of the term Pilates. But it has a very sort of unusual origin, doesn't it? Joseph Pilates, I was just reading about him. He was the son of a gymnast Greek father and a German naturopathic mother. So,
Joseph Pilates was born in around 1883.
Right.
In Germany. And, at that time, I think in Germany it was quite, there was a lot of outdoor living and natural medicine and so
Yes.
on. And he kind of grew up in that environment. The story goes that he was a sickly child, but he studied anatomy and movement from both Eastern and Western influence, and then developed his own, started to develop his own body and started to, work on improving his strength and his health. And,
Right.
Kind of going on from there. And then, again, I'll go through a brief story here. Just before the First World War, he moved to England. And then when the war broke out, he was then put into an internment camp with other German nationals.
Right. Yes.
And again, would train the other, I guess, inmates with his routine. And that was sort of where he started to develop his mat work, what we now know as the mat work.
Right.
And the story goes that he also started to use springs and pulleys from the beds to create resistance for those that couldn't, needed the support. And that, again, is the
Right.
sort of precursor to the equipment that we know today.
Yes, which you sometimes refer to as like your personal torture chamber. Yeah, that's what it looks like.
No, I don't refer to it as that. But I have when people first come in, sometimes they refer to it as that.
Right.
Oh,
Okay.
gosh, this looks very unusual. And really, the equipment we use today, the apparatus we use today, is still as he designed it back in the 1920s and 30s. So
Right.
it is springs and straps, and it looks quite simple now compared to very sophisticated computerized equipment that we have in the gyms.
Right.
But it's still as he designed it,
Yeah.
because it works. Simple, but it works.
I read something. Well, I read a couple of things. The first thing is that you have to think of Pilates as being something of yoga mixed with gymnastics. That was one thing. Does that sound right to you?
I think with his thought process and him developing his system, there's definitely influences of both yoga and gymnastics in
Right.
there. I would say, I know a lot of people ask me what's the difference between yoga and Pilates, and I'm not a yoga teacher, I'm not a yoga expert, so anybody listening, please forgive me if I get this wrong. But to me, they are similar. They both involve mind and body connection. They both focus on breathing, and they both improve your strength and flexibility. But
Right.
the physical difference to me is that with yoga, you focus more on moving into a position and holding it, whereas with Pilates, we use movement to challenge your stability. So
Right. Okay.
they look similar, but they have a different focus.
Uh-huh. The other thing that I read that I don't know if again you can identify with this, but that he took his inspiration from two things that he had observed. One was cats, and the other one was babies, and it was something to do with the movement and the range of movement, and does that make sense to you as well, Sue?
Yes, it does. It does, because if you think about it, when you are a baby, there's no restriction in your movement. You just move your body. As you grow older, as you grow up, we start to compensate. We have compensations in our body, maybe from injuries, maybe from tightness or stiffness, and we're trying to get back to having a uniformly developed body so that
Right.
we can move freely without pain. And so that I can understand that. And also, watching a cat stretch and move, there's an ease in their movement. So
Right.
I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. So, is a lot of what you do about developing core strength? Around I guess the central part of the body.
Yes, I mean, it is a full body workout, but we do focus on the core, which is not just your abdominals. It includes, the muscles in your lower back, your hips, your glutes. It's that those muscle groups that support your pelvis and your spinal column.
Right.
Okay. If you've got, like, I had a back issue, so I didn't have any particular specific issue, just back pain, back issue. And I needed to strengthen my core to support my back, to
Right.
take away the pain. So yes, we do focus on that, and so you're having a stable base to move your arms and legs freely.
Right.
So yeah, we do, but we also work the whole body, but the focus starts there.
Sure. Yeah. It was just that I certainly got this impression that it is a whole body thing, but I seem to get this idea from reading a little bit about it that without this sort of development of the core muscles, it's very difficult to sort of, it's the kind of central part of what you're doing.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So you start trying to create a stable center to move from. Everything, all the movement initiates from that center.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Um, a question just about, I think people might find this interesting. You've set up your business here on the Costa del Sol. What was that process like for you, Sue? Was it difficult? Was it very bureaucratic? How did that whole thing work out?
So when I first moved here, the first year I registered as autonomo, self-employed, and I
Right.
was teaching my online clients. And then as after that first year, it's been a dream of mine to open my own studio. So um, we decided that that's what we were going to do. I say we, my husband and I decided that that's what we were going
Right.
to do. And you know, my I think the thing that we decided, we obviously wanted to make sure we did everything correctly. Um, and so we took advice from a lot of different places, different people that we
Yes.
spoke to make sure that we were basically ticking all those boxes and we were doing what we needed to do.
Yeah.
Um, I think what's difficult coming into a country where you've never run a business, and I've never actually run a business before. I was self-employed as
Right.
a contract teacher before, but I didn't actually have a physical business. Is knowing what to ask and who to ask. What you don't know, what you don't know.
Sure.
If
Sure.
you understand what I mean. So I think getting advice was critical for us. We worked to find a location. We worked with a commercial real estate person to find this. When we got the draft rental agreement, I had my Hestor, my tax advisor, Hestor, read through it. He checked all the contract out and asked questions and so on.
Right. Yeah.
And then, somebody to help us apply for the business license. So that person came into this location and advised,
What you need? Yeah.
was everything up to regulation. So there was a lot of stuff to think about, and it takes time, like everything.
Yes.
Um, but I think with the right help and the right advice, we got there.
Yeah, sure. And it's just to let people know that this role of gestor, they can be a lot of things. They usually do accounts for businesses because it's really hard for businesses to do their own accounts unless you're an accountant.
Oh yes.
But they do also help with all sorts of paperwork, don't they?
Yes.
And help to get things done first. I mean, even if you want to change your driving license, the easiest way is go to a gestor. They do all the paperwork and they get it sorted out for you. And hopefully you get it done first time round.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that was that side of it was, I'm not going to say it was completely smooth because I don't think it is wherever you are. Um, One of the reasons I do think you need the advice is, I'm learning Spanish, but, you know, I am no way fluent that I could read a document,
No,
a legal
sure.
document. Um, so you do need somebody to check and to help you with that. And I'm very fortunate. My sister-in-law lives here as well, and she speaks fluent Spanish, so she was
Good,
a
right.
help for us.
Yeah.
But even just things at that time, we were coming out of COVID. I was ordering equipment from Turkey, so it's made to order. So that's
Right.
always made to order. Then there was delays with shipment. There was delays with actually getting the raw materials as well. So
Right.
your best laid plans of when you're going to open, there was a delay with that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
of at
Yeah.
that time, there was a short supply of everything in the
Sure,
world.
sure. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want you to talk us through a bit more about your business, and about Pilates and the kind of age groups of people that you tend to work with.
Hmm.
And well, we'll go from there. Welcome back. I'm Bill Anderson, coming live from the Costa del Sol with my guest today, Sue Williams, who has a Pilates studio, Evo Pilates, here in La Cala de Mijas on the Costa del Sol in the southern Spain. Welcome back, Sue.
Thank you.
So we've been talking about your experiences of moving to Spain and setting up your business, and as you say, setting up a business anywhere is never simple. But you got there, you got through COVID, you're still here. Um, how do you sort of operate things now? Do you have classes every day? How does that work?
Okay, so in the studio, I have equipment and I have mats. So I work with very small groups on the mat
Right,
classes. So I take 6 to 7. I like to really focus on individuals, being able to give cues and individual attention. So I have mat classes at set times every day of the week, except Friday. And other than that, I do private equipment classes. So I work
right,
one-on-one with clients, which that's scheduled throughout the week. And so I'm here Monday to Friday, sometimes Saturday.
right.
But I like to work one-on-one with clients because or in very small groups anyway, because I do like to really focus on their individual needs and give them the attention that they deserve.
Right, and Sue, what kind of age groups, for example, do you tend to find taking this up? Are the young people? Are they middle aged? Are they elderly? I guess it can work for anybody, but typically, what do you see?
Well, you're right. Pilates can be for absolutely anybody. Everybody's Pilates would look different. I mean, we have a great depth of exercises and material to work with. So, somebody who is 20 may be doing different things than somebody that is 80. But, it is accessible for everybody at any age. Typically here, I would say, ranging from, I don't know, I want to say like 30s up through to 70s. I have
Right,
a wide age. In my experience as a teacher, I've had a 16-year-old dancer up to an 86-year-old gentleman.
right.
So, and every age in between.
But I guess your 16-year-old dancer was looking for something a little bit different from your 80-something-year-old gentleman, yeah?
Absolutely, absolutely. And like I said, um, there is so much richness in the work that you can modify, or I don't want to say modify, but you can choose what is right for that individual. For a 16-year-old dancer, she was working back from an ankle injury.
Right,
My 86-year-old client was just, wanted to move, wanted to stay fit and healthy, wanted to be able to play 18 holes of golf, very
right.
important to it. And, taking Pilates 3 times a week was his way of being able to play his golf. So it really depends on what the individual's aims are, what your
Right,
goals are at the end of the day. And, as you come into the studio, if you have a particular issue, such as, I don't know, a knee issue, maybe, there may be certain things we need to work more on and certain things we need to avoid, just depending on where you are in your recovery.
right.
So, Pilates can look very different for each individual person. Even if you've got two bodies sitting side by side and doing the same exercise, it's going to look different because our bodies are different. Our body proportions, what some people are more flexible, some people are more inflexible. So,
Right, yes.
it's really different depending on what the individual goals are.
So again, would it vary? I'm thinking about this sort of flexibility and strength training. Would it vary for individuals as to whether flexibility was the most important thing, and movement, or strength training? Would Pilates cover that as well?
Yes, it would cover all of that. I mean, the whole system that you're working through, we have, I say system, that's, the mat work, there's all the different pieces of equipment. They all support one another in that system. So, you are going to get strength, flexibility, stamina, all of that work, resistance work if you're using the equipment. If you're doing mat work, you're creating your own resistance with your body weight.
Right.
So, the whole system works, all of that, the strength, the flexibility, and so on.
I do recall, Sue, that's a number of years ago that the Royal Ballet actually had a Pilates instructor in London.
Yes.
And I guess for fairly obvious reasons, because they need strength and flexibility and movement, don't they?
I think as well for dancers, they're very much they work on having a beautiful line when they're extending their legs or their arms or whatever it might be, but they need the core strength to stabilize their body as they are doing that, and that's what Pilates gives them, is that core strength. I mean, there's a lot of top class athletes who do Pilates as well, whether that be, football players, tennis players, golfers, American footballers, all of that, all of those different, as well as dancers. I mean, it sort of encompasses everybody from those top class athletes all the way through the age ranges and the fitness levels. Right.
I'm going to say something that's probably quite a crass thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm allowed to. It's I get the feeling that a lot of men would go, oh no, I'm not into that sort of thing. I'm not into it. A kind of macho thing, I suppose. Do you find an equal number of women and men actually coming for classes, or do you find predominantly it's women that are picking up on this?
I will say, I think for the group classes, it's predominantly women, because I think women like that kind of sense of community as well as the exercise.
Right.
I think men tend to come into a private setting because they can just work on their own goals. But I think what people really need to, especially men, need to think about is that Joseph Pilates initially devised this for men.
Right, of course, yes.
Yeah. And when he was he moved to New York in the mid-1920s and opened his own studio. At that point, it was for men. But, in New York at the time, there was a very big dance community, and dancers who were injured were sent to him for rehabilitation. Right. And that's why I think it became almost known as for dancers. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the initial focus.
Yeah. And this combination, as we said, of the kind of yoga principles and the gymnastic principles is an interesting combination, isn't it?
Yes. But no matter your age, your male, female, whatever, you still need that core strength.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, so if you are a golfer, I'm going to use golfing because obviously golf is so prominent here, is, having that stable base to be able to move from.
Right.
Especially as, for something like a tennis player or a golf player, there are imbalances in their body because they're constantly moving in one plane or one direction. So, also Pilates can help address those imbalances.
Yeah, well, our producer there in France, Dave, he fancies himself as a bit of a golfer. So, Dave, we'll get you signed up for some online courses, sure, yeah?
Just let me know.
When we were talking previously, Sue, you were saying that I think Dave might be going to say something profound here.
Profound? What do you mean profound? I'll never say anything profound in my life. No, I was going to tell you, many a day I spent up at Shrigley in the gym there after playing. Me and Murph and Andy Cole and Dwight York. My God, we were all cripples with all these different football injuries, going out playing golf, and then it was a nightmare. But it was quite funny. Clayton Blackmore was there from Man United as well. It was like a lineup. We could all say to each other, "What's wrong with you today?" And it was one thing after another with us all. It was just, it was nuts, really. It was more like a hospital than a leisure club. It was ridiculous.
I will tell you, my husband is a Manchester City fan.
Oh, so, dear.
Yeah. I'm just saying that
him.
because I know there was he was watching a documentary on Manchester City, which I just saw, and they had Pilates equipment in their gym. And I was like, yes.
Pretty good. Well, you can tell him we've got a Jack Grealish shirt that he can bid for the Cheshire Down Syndrome Association, because we've got a big golf charity event there on August the 21st at Mere.
Right, I'll tell him.
Yeah, so I'll give Bill all the information, the landing page, and he can send it over to you. And then if you both want to go over for the event, you can buy tickets for the event. So they've got a hotel, have they, now at Mere at the golf club, so you can stay overnight if you want to go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Why have I got onto networking now when we're talking about Pilates? Don't get me involved.
Pilates equipment in the Manchester City gym. That was Yeah. So you were saying, so, and you sent me a photograph, and I saw what you meant about some of the equipment that it still uses, sort of straps and springs and sort of chains and things, which I guess is what Joseph Pilates had available to him in the prisoner of war camp, on the Isle of Man.
Yeah, but also, he developed the pieces of equipment after the war when he went, and then as he moved to America. So, at that point, I guess it's what's available to you. Like you say, there wasn't sophisticated machinery at that point, but what he built worked and still works.
Yeah.
So it still is as the original design.
And I suppose, as they say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. The proof is in the work.
Yeah, but you look at some gyms nowadays, and you're surrounded by electronic equipment, and people get obsessed about a millisecond on their watch and things like that, and I'm not sure it actually works any better than some traditional ways of doing things.
I think sometimes it just becomes a bit of a distraction.
Right.
But it does for me anyway, and I'm not particularly computer minded, so that would probably be detrimental to me.
Yeah. So if you were recommending Pilates to anyone, Sue, what kind of advice would you give? What would you say to them? These are the reasons why Pilates could be for you.
Ooh, why? Well, I guess it's going to depend on your goals, but there's lots of benefits to doing Pilates. It is a method that helps improve your posture, which face it, these days most of us are on phones and at computers, and especially when people have been working from home so much, you don't always have the right desk and chair and so on, so that posture is a huge issue for a lot of people, which it helps improve your posture and your alignment. Obviously we've talked about flexibility, improvement in flexibility, but also joint mobility. It helps build your strength, improves your coordination, and also helps with balance, especially as we age. Balance becomes an issue.
Yeah.
And also because there is a mind and body connection, your body and your mind work together. You can improve your focus, but also helps like stress relief. It helps you, it just helps you focus and just relieve stress. So there's lots of different reasons. I would, my advice to anybody who wants to start Pilates is to, find somewhere where you've got a teacher. You can look at what the teacher, look at how the teacher approaches things and where their, what their philosophy is, and see if it matches with what you want, out of your Pilates.
Right. But this isn't about you selling Pilates to the general public.
No.
But potentially, I don't know, 98% of the population could benefit from this kind of regular exercise, and well, I suppose to some extent it's therapy for some people.
Absolutely. When you come into any studio, and you are working, like I said, there is that mind-body connection.
Yeah.
You have to focus on how you're moving. It takes your mind away from everything else that's going on in your life at that point, because you have to focus. So it does give you that time for yourself, that, hour just to relax.
Yeah.
And work and focus on yourself and not what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah. So if people would be interested in finding out what you do, what would be the best way for them to contact you? You have a website?
I do have a website, which is evopilates.com, and all the contact details are on there. The best way is either email through the website, or there's a telephone number there to contact by WhatsApp.
Right. And you're still doing quite a lot of work online as well, Sue, yeah?
I do, yes. I still have my clients that have stayed with me throughout. Some of those clients I've actually been teaching for about 10 years now. Not online, but,
Right.
have stayed with me a long time. So I still do that, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so when we do the podcast, we'll put evopilates.com, and if people are interested in contacting you, you are available for online work as well, yeah?
I am, yes.
Yeah. It's amazing, Sue, how so many people have made this sort of adaptation from face-to-face work into online work, as a result of all of the restrictions that we faced during
Absolutely.
the COVID period. And how many have actually said, I would never have thought of doing this, but I would be reluctant to give it up now.
Well, you know what? It's like everything, like I said, some of these clients I've worked with a long time, and because you work one-on-one, you build a relationship. So there is a connection and a relationship. You spend that amount of time with somebody. So for me, it's a way for me to still have those relationships and still see those people as well as work with them. So it's a win-win for me.
Yeah. And you did mention to me previously, Sue, that you are in a constant state of sort of improving yourself in terms of your training and keeping it up to date as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I learn something every day from every client that comes in, from everybody that I see, but also, I truly believe that you constantly need to educate yourself. There's always something more to learn.
Yeah.
And it also keeps you fresh in your teaching, and being able to pass that on to the people you work with.
Yeah.
I think it's really important.
And do you find new things? You I don't know, you do a training course or something, whether it's presential or online. Do you always come away with something new from that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Because, every person that you learn from has a different focus and a different viewpoint. And there's always something to take away from that. There's always something new to learn, which is, to me, is great. It keeps everything fresh.
Sue, our time has gone. Can I thank you very much for joining me today? It's been very interesting. And evopilates.com if they want to get in touch with you. Have a great weekend, Sue. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much.
And to everyone who's been listening.
Thank you for asking me to come on.
My pleasure. Have a great weekend, everyone.